The phone call came at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. I should have known something was wrong when I saw my daughter-in-law's name flashing on my screen. In 3 years of marriage to my son Michael, Jessica had never once called me directly. "Mrs. Sanchez?" Her voice was tight, controlled in that way people get when they're trying not to cry. "We need to talk about what you've been saying about me." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. "Jessica? What are you talking about, honey?" "Don't." The word came out sharp, cutting. "Michael told me everything. How you think I'm manipulating him, turning him against his family. How you've been telling people I'm some kind of gold digger who's trying to isolate him from you." The kitchen floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This story will shock you, so make sure to like and subscribe for more. Drop a comment with your city name, because what happened next would tear our family apart in ways I never imagined possible. "Jessica, I have never said anything like that about you. Not to anyone. Not ever." My voice came out steadier than I felt, but inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Then why would Michael tell me you did?" She was crying now. I could hear it. "Why would my own husband lie to me about something like this?" That's when I knew we had a real problem on our hands. "My name is Carmen Sanchez. I'm 58 years old, and I've been dealing with family drama for most of my adult life. But this was different. This felt like sabotage from the inside, and it was coming from the last person I ever expected. Michael David Sanchez, my youngest son, had always been my gentle boy. Even at 26, he still called me every Sunday, still brought Jessica over for dinner twice a month, still hugged me like he meant it when they left. The idea that he would fabricate lies about me, tell his wife that I'd accused her of manipulating him, was so far beyond anything I could imagine that I felt physically sick. But Jessica's tears were real. Her pain was real. And if Michael was telling her these things, there had to be a reason. After I hung up the phone, promising Jessica we'd figure this out together, I sat in my kitchen staring at the morning light streaming through my yellow curtains. The same curtains I'd hung when Michael was in high school, the same kitchen table where he'd done his homework while I cooked dinner. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. I needed backup. I needed someone who knew my family, who could help me make sense of what was happening. So I called my husband Roberto. Roberto Sanchez had been married to me for 32 years, and if anyone could help me understand why our son might be lying about me to his wife, it would be him. Roberto knew Michael's patterns, his insecurities, his history of sometimes bending the truth when he felt cornered. "Mijo has always been a people pleaser," Roberto said when I explained the phone call. He was at his construction site, and I could hear machinery humming in the background. "Remember when he was 16 and told you I said he could go to that party, then told me you said it was okay?" "This is different, Roberto. This isn't about a party. This is about Jessica thinking I hate her, thinking I'm trying to destroy their marriage. I know, mi amor. I'm just saying Michael sometimes creates stories to avoid conflict. Maybe Jessica was upset about something else, something between them, and instead of dealing with it, he gave her someone else to blame. The possibility hit me like a physical blow, that my son might be using me as a scapegoat for problems in his marriage, letting his wife believe I was the villain rather than facing whatever was really going wrong between them. But I needed more perspective. I needed someone outside the family who could see this clearly. That's why I called my friend, Rita Martinez. Rita and I had worked together at the bank for 15 years before we both retired, and she knew my family almost as well as I did. More importantly, Rita had a way of cutting through emotional noise to get to the truth. "Carmen, slow down," Rita said when I called her that afternoon, my words tumbling over each other as I explained the situation. "Let me get this straight. Jessica called you crying, saying Michael told her you accused her of turning him against you?" "Yes, and Rita, I swear to you, I have never said anything like that. Not to Michael, not to Roberto, not to anyone. I like Jessica. I've always liked Jessica." Rita was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful, measured. "Honey, I've watched you with that girl at church at family gatherings. You light up when she walks in the room. This doesn't make sense." "That's what I keep thinking. Why would Michael make up something like this?" "Maybe," Rita said slowly, "the question isn't why he made it up. Maybe the question is what he's trying to hide." That evening, I sat in my living room, surrounded by family photos that suddenly felt like evidence of a life I'd misunderstood. Michael's senior portrait smiled down at me from the mantel, his eyes bright with possibility. Wedding photos from 2 years ago, Jessica radiant in white lace, Michael's arm protectively around her waist. Me, dancing with both of them at the reception, laughing like we didn't have a care in the world. How had we gotten from there to here? How had my relationship with my son become so twisted that he was telling his wife lies about me, poisoning her against me for reasons I couldn't begin to understand? My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Can we meet tomorrow?" I think there's more to this story than either of us knows. I stared at those words until they blurred. Whatever was happening in my family, whatever Michael was hiding or protecting or running from, it was bigger than just a misunderstanding. It was something that could destroy the relationships I'd spent decades building. Suddenly, the pieces aligned. The next morning, I met Jessica at the small coffee shop near the university where she teaches. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Thank you for coming," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "I barely slept last night." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Jessica, honey, I need you to know something. I have never, not once, accused you of turning Michael against me. I don't even think that. You've been nothing but wonderful to our family." Her face crumpled slightly. "I was hoping you'd say that, but it's making everything so much more confusing. Why would Michael tell me you said those things? He was so specific about it. He said you told Roberto that I was manipulating him, that I didn't want him spending time with family." "When did he supposedly tell you this?" 3 days ago. We were having dinner, and I mentioned that we should visit you this weekend." Suddenly, he got this angry look on his face and said, "Why would you want to visit someone who thinks you're poison?" When I asked what he meant, he told me about these conversations he claimed you'd had with Roberto. I felt my stomach drop. "Jessica, I need to ask you something, and please be honest with me. How have things been between you and Michael lately?" "Really?" She stared down at her coffee for a long moment. "Not good," she whispered. "Not good at all. He's been so distant, so angry about everything. His job, our apartment, money. But mostly, he seems angry at himself. And when Michael gets angry at himself, he lashes out at everyone around him. Has he done this before? Blamed me for things?" "Not exactly like this, but—" She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "Sometimes, when we fight, he brings up how his family doesn't understand him, how nobody supports his decisions. But I always thought he was just venting frustration." I leaned forward. "What kinds of decisions?" Jessica looked uncomfortable. "He's been talking about quitting his job at the accounting firm, He says it's soul-crushing, that he wants to start his own business. But when I ask him what kind of business, or how we'd pay our bills, he gets defensive. He says I'm being negative, that I don't believe in him. Do you believe in him? Of course I do. But I also believe in being practical. We have student loans, rent, car payments, I teach high school English, which isn't exactly lucrative. If he quits his job without a real plan? She shrugged helplessly. The pieces were starting to come together, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. So, when you expressed concerns about his business idea, he told you I was the one poisoning you against him? It's worse than that, Jessica said, her voice barely audible. Yesterday, after I talked to you, I went home and confronted him about it. I told him you denied ever saying those things. And he doubled down. He said of course you'd deny it, that you were probably embarrassed about being caught talking behind my back. My heart sank. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or even a momentary lapse in judgment. Michael was deliberately lying to his wife, using me as a scapegoat for the problems in their marriage. There's something else, Jessica continued. When I kept pressing him about it, asking for specifics about when and where these conversations happened, he got really angry. He said I was choosing his family over him, that everyone was ganging up on him. Then he stormed out and didn't come home until after midnight. Where did he go? I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. Jessica's voice broke slightly. I love your son, but I don't understand what's happening to him. It's like he's looking for reasons to be angry, reasons to push everyone away. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was so much bigger than Michael lying about me. This was about a young man who was struggling with his life direction and taking it out on the people who loved him most. Jessica, I think we need to talk to Roberto about this. Michael specifically made me promise not to involve Roberto. He said it would just make family drama worse. Honey, the drama already exists. Michael created it, and Roberto deserves to know what his brother is doing to our family. Jessica nodded reluctantly. You're right, but I'm scared about what this means for my marriage. If Michael finds out I talked to you and Roberto about this, we'll figure it out together, I assured her. But we can't let him keep manipulating the situation, and we can't let him destroy our relationships with lies. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Jessica turned to me with tears in her eyes. Can I ask you something? Do you think there's something seriously wrong with Michael? Like, mentally? This isn't the man I married. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Roberto's name flashed on the screen, and when I answered, his voice was tight with anger. Mom, we need to talk. Right now. Michael just called me with a very different version of what happened yesterday, and I think it's time we got to the bottom of this mess. I looked at my phone, Roberto's name still flashing on the screen, and felt my stomach drop. Jessica's eyes widened as she heard his voice through the speaker. Roberto, I'm actually with Jessica right now. We were just about to call you. There was a pause. You're with Jessica? That's interesting, because Michael just spent 20 minutes telling me how you and Jessica have been conspiring behind his back, comparing notes about all the terrible things he's supposedly done. I closed my eyes, feeling the web of lies getting more tangled. Roberto, where are you right now? We need to sit down and talk this through properly. I'm at the park near your house, the one with the playground. Can you both come here? Jessica nodded, though she looked terrified. As we walked the 3 blocks to the park, I tried to process what was happening to my family. Michael wasn't just lying anymore. He was actively working to turn us against each other. The thought that my son was deliberately trying to destroy our relationships made me feel sick. When we arrived, Roberto was sitting on a bench, his face grim. He looked up as we approached, and I could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Okay," he said without preamble. "Michael called me an hour ago, crying." "Actually crying, Mom?" "He said you've been meeting with Jessica regularly, that you're both keeping a list of his mistakes, and that you told Jessica she should consider leaving him." "That's completely untrue," I said, sitting down beside him. Jessica remained standing, wrapping her arms around herself. "He also said that yesterday, when Jessica confronted him, she threw it in his face that you had denied saying those things about her. He said it proved you two have been talking about him behind his back." I felt a flash of anger, not just at the lies, but at how cleverly Michael was twisting the truth. Yes, Jessica and I had talked. Yes, we had discussed his behavior, but not in the way he was portraying it. "Roberto, your brother has been telling Jessica for weeks that I accused her of turning him against me. Yesterday, she finally asked me about it, and I told her the truth, that I never said any such thing. Now he's spinning our conversation into some kind of conspiracy." Roberto ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from when he was a stressed teenager. "I don't understand why he would lie about something like this. What does he gain from it?" Jessica finally spoke up, her voice shaky. "I think he gains sympathy, and he gets to avoid taking responsibility for the problems in our marriage." She sat down heavily on the bench across from us. "Roberto, there's more. He's been distant for months, angry all the time, and whenever I try to talk to him about it, he finds a way to blame someone else. First it was his job, then it was me, now it's your mom." "But why would he make up specific conversations that never happened?" Roberto asked, looking between us. I had been wondering the same thing, and a disturbing possibility had occurred to me. "I think he's not just lying to you and Jessica. I think he's lying to himself. He's created this narrative where everyone is against him, and he's starting to believe it's real." Roberto stared at the ground for a long moment. "When he called me today, he sounded genuinely hurt, like he really believed what he was saying. But if you're both telling me these conversations never happened—" "They didn't," I said firmly. "Roberto, I would never say the things he's claiming I said. You know me better than that." "I do know you better than that," he said quietly. "Which is why this whole thing has been eating at me. It didn't sound like you, but Michael was so convincing, so specific about details." Jessica leaned forward. "What kind of details?" Roberto looked uncomfortable. "He said your mom told him that you came to her crying about how controlling he was, that you said he was just like his father when he got angry." I felt my face flush with anger. I have never had such a conversation with Jessica, and I would never compare Michael to his father in that way. You both know how your father's temper affected our family. I would never weaponize that history. He also said you told Jessica that he was probably depressed and that she should give him an ultimatum about getting help." Now Jessica looked shocked. "I never told your mother that Michael might be depressed, though honestly, I've been wondering about it myself." The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. Michael wasn't just creating lies to avoid conflict. He was creating an alternate reality where his problems were everyone else's fault. "Roberto," I said carefully, "when Michael talks to you about these things, does he seem angry or does he seem hurt?" "Hurt, mostly. Like he can't believe his own family would turn on him. And that makes you want to protect him." "Of course it does. He's my brother." I nodded, understanding now how Michael was manipulating the situation. "He's not just lying, honey. He's performing. He's created this story where he's the victim, and he's gotten so deep into it that I think he believes it himself. Roberto looked up at me, and I could see the moment when everything clicked into place. You think he's having some kind of breakdown? I think he's struggling with something he doesn't know how to handle, and instead of asking for help, he's trying to control how everyone sees the situation. Jessica stood up abruptly. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep walking on eggshells, wondering what he's going to twist next. I need to go home and pack a bag. Jessica, wait, I said, standing as well. Don't make any permanent decisions when you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of being married to someone who lies about me to his family. I'm tired of defending myself against accusations that don't make sense. Roberto stood too, and I could see the panic in his eyes. Jessica, please don't leave. If you leave, it'll just convince Michael that he was right about everything. Maybe he needs to be convinced he was right, Jessica said, her voice getting stronger. Maybe he needs to see what happens when you push everyone away with lies and manipulation. Just then, I heard a car door slam in the parking lot behind us. We all turned, and my heart sank when I saw Michael walking toward us, his face thunderous. Well, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Isn't this cozy? All three of you having a nice little meeting about me. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park bench where we sat, and suddenly, the peaceful setting felt charged with tension. Michael approached us with deliberate steps, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, his shoulders rigid with anger. The way he walked reminded me of a storm cloud moving across an otherwise clear sky. Michael, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. We were hoping you'd join us. Were you? His laugh was bitter, hollow. Because it looks like you've been having quite the productive little intervention without me. His eyes swept over Jessica, Roberto, and me, lingering on each face as if memorizing evidence of our betrayal. Jessica remained standing, her purse clutched in her hands like armor. We were trying to figure out why everyone's stories about what's been said don't match up. Oh, I see. So now I'm a liar too? Michael's voice rose slightly, and I noticed an elderly couple at a nearby picnic table glance our way before quickly looking away. The park suddenly felt too public for this conversation, but there was no backing down now. Roberto shifted uncomfortably on the bench. Nobody called you a liar, Mike. We're just confused about some things. Don't. Michael's voice cut through the air like a blade. Don't sit there and pretend you haven't been discussing how crazy I am, how I'm making things up. His face was flushed now, and I could see a vein pulsing at his temple. I heard you, Mom, when I was walking up, talking about me having some kind of breakdown. My stomach dropped. How much had he overheard? Michael, if you heard our conversation, then you also heard us trying to understand what's happening. We're worried about you. Worried? He stepped closer to our little group, and I could smell his cologne mixed with something sharper. Sweat, maybe, or the metallic scent of anxiety. You're worried about me? That's rich? You've been poisoning everyone against me, and now you're worried? Jessica made a sound of frustration, somewhere between a sigh and a groan. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your mother just spent 20 minutes defending you, trying to figure out where these miscommunications started, and you're still accusing her of being against you. Michael's attention snapped to Jessica like a rubber band released too quickly. And you're probably loving this. Finally got my whole family convinced that I'm the problem. Michael, stop. Roberto stood up from the bench, his tall frame casting a shadow over the rest of us. Just stop for a minute and listen to yourself. Nobody here is against you." But Michael was like a runaway train now, his words coming faster, his gestures more animated. "Oh, that's perfect. That's just perfect. My little brother, taking everyone else's side. Do you know what she told me you said about me, Roberto? Do you want to know what lies she's been spreading?" Roberto's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "She said you told her I was always jealous of you, that I resented how close you and Mom are." The words hung in the air like smoke. Roberto looked stricken, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I felt something cold settle in my chest as I watched my younger son struggle to process this accusation. "I never," Roberto whispered, then found his voice. "I never said anything like that. Jessica, you know I never said that." Jessica was shaking her head slowly, her face a mask of disbelief. "Michael, I have never had that conversation with Roberto. Not ever." "I don't know why you would say that." But even as she spoke, I could see something shifting in Michael's expression. For just a moment, confusion flickered across his features, as if he was trying to grasp something that kept slipping away. Then, almost immediately, the anger returned, stronger than before. "So now I'm just making things up completely? Is that what you all think?" His voice was getting louder, and the family at the picnic table was packing up their lunch, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding near them. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "Michael, honey, I think we need to have this conversation somewhere more private." "No." His response was immediate and sharp. "I'm done with private conversations. I'm done with all of you deciding things about me behind my back." He looked at each of us in turn, his eyes bright with something that looked almost fevered. "You want to know what I think? I think you've all been planning this. Getting your story straight before confronting me." The paranoia in his voice sent a chill through me. This wasn't just anger or defensiveness anymore. This was something deeper. Something that scared me in a way I hadn't felt since he was a child, waking up from nightmares. Roberto took a step toward his brother. "Michael, nobody is planning anything. We love you. We're here because we love you." "Don't." Michael held up his hand, as if physically pushing Roberto away. "Don't you dare talk to me about love while you're all ganging up on me like this." Jessica's composure finally cracked. "We're not ganging up on you. We're trying to understand why you keep telling people we said things we never said. Why you keep creating problems that don't exist." "Creating problems?" Michael's laugh was sharp and bitter. "I'm creating problems? I'm not the one who called a family meeting to discuss how mentally unstable I am." "It's not a family meeting," I said, trying to inject some calm into the chaos. "We ran into each other, and we started talking because we care about you." But Michael was beyond hearing reason. His face was red now, his breathing shallow and rapid. "I should have known. I should have known you'd all turn on me eventually, just like Dad did." The mention of his father hit me like a physical blow. Roberto stepped back as if he'd been slapped. Even Jessica, who had been holding her ground, seemed to deflate slightly. "Michael," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "your father never turned on you, and neither have we." "Haven't you?" He looked at me with such pain in his eyes that I felt my own chest tighten. "Then why does it feel like I'm fighting for my life here?" Before any of us could answer, Michael turned and walked away, his stride quick and purposeful. But instead of heading back to his car, he headed deeper into the park, toward the walking trails that wound through the woods beyond the playground. "Should we follow him?" Roberto asked, his voice shaking slightly. Jessica was already moving. "I'm going after him. This has gone too far." I caught Jessica's arm before she could take another step. "Wait," I said, watching Michael's figure grow smaller as he disappeared into the shadowy mouth of the trail. The late afternoon sun was already casting long shadows through the trees, and something about letting him go alone into those woods felt wrong. "Mom, he's spiraling," Jessica said, but she stopped moving. Her hand was trembling slightly where I held her arm. "Did you see his face? The way he was breathing?" Roberto ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his childhood that it made my heart ache. "He mentioned Dad," he said quietly. "He never talks about Dad anymore, not since the funeral." The three of us stood there in an awkward triangle, the playground equipment casting geometric shadows across the wood chips at our feet. A swing moved gently in the breeze, its chain creaking with a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. "Maybe we should give him space," I said, though every maternal instinct I had was screaming at me to follow him. "He's overwhelmed. We all came at him at once, even if we didn't mean to." Jessica shook her head. "Space is what got us here in the first place." All of us walking on eggshells, pretending we don't notice when he tells different versions of the same conversation. She gestured toward the trail where Michael had vanished. "Look at him, Mom. He's not just upset. There's something else going on." I knew she was right. The Michael who had just confronted us wasn't the son I'd raised, or even the grieving man who'd struggled after his father's death. There had been something frantic in his eyes, something that reminded me of a cornered animal. Roberto sat down heavily on the nearest bench, his shoulders sagging. "Remember when he was little and he'd get overwhelmed at family gatherings? He'd hide in that closet under the stairs until Dad would go find him." "This isn't the same thing," Jessica said, but her voice was gentler now. She sat down next to Roberto, leaving space for me between them. "He's not 7 years old anymore." I settled onto the bench, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on my shoulders. Through the trees, I could hear the distant sound of Michael's footsteps on the gravel trail, though I couldn't see him anymore. The park felt different now, less peaceful and more ominous. "What did he mean about your father turning on him?" I asked Roberto. "Your dad never said a harsh word to Michael, even when he was being difficult." Roberto was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "You know how Dad was those last few months? The cancer, the medication. He got confused sometimes, said things he didn't mean." He looked up at me, his eyes reflecting the same pain I'd seen in Michael's. "There was this one day, maybe 2 weeks before Dad died. Michael was visiting, and Dad got agitated. Started accusing Michael of only coming around for the inheritance. The words hit me like ice water. I never knew that happened. Michael made me promise not to tell you. Said you had enough to worry about." Roberto's voice cracked slightly. "Dad was out of his head with the morphine, but Michael took it to heart. He left that day and barely came back until the funeral." Jessica leaned forward, wrapping her arms around her knees. "So he thinks Dad turned on him, and now he thinks we're doing the same thing." The trail had gone quiet. I could no longer hear Michael's footsteps, which somehow felt worse than hearing them. The woods weren't particularly deep, but there were several branching paths, and it would be easy to get turned around in the fading light. "We have to go after him," I said, standing up abruptly. "Whatever's going on with him, he shouldn't be alone right now." Roberto stood too, but Jessica remained seated. "And say what? We just confronted him about lying, and his response was to accuse us of ganging up on him. If we chase him down, won't that just prove his point? She was right, but the alternative felt impossible. Let my son wander around in the woods in whatever state he was in, while the three people who loved him most sat on a park bench debating the best approach. I can't just sit here, I said. Something's wrong with him. Something more than grief or stress. You saw how he was acting? Mom, Jessica's voice was very quiet. What if he's having some kind of breakdown? The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we'd all been thinking it. The inconsistent stories, the paranoia, the way he'd looked at us like we were strangers. Roberto started walking toward the trail entrance. Breakdown or not, he's still my brother. I'm not leaving him alone in there. Jessica and I fell into step behind him, our footsteps loud on the gravel path. The trees closed around us quickly, blocking out most of the remaining daylight. The trail was well maintained but narrow, forcing us to walk single file. Michael? Roberto called out, his voice echoing slightly off the trees. Michael, we just want to make sure you're okay. No response. The only sounds were our footsteps and the whisper of wind through the leaves above us. The trail split ahead, one path curving left toward a small creek, the other climbing uphill toward what I remembered was a scenic overlook. We stopped at the fork, looking down both paths for any sign of which way Michael had gone. The light was fading faster than I'd expected, and I realized we might have made a serious mistake by following him without flashlights or any real plan. That's when we heard it, a sound that made all three of us freeze. It was coming from the direction of the overlook, and it sounded like someone crying. But it wasn't just crying. It was the raw, broken sound of someone falling apart completely. The sound cut through me like a physical blow. In 32 years of being Michael's mother, I had heard him cry exactly 3 times: when he broke his arm at age 7 at his father's funeral, and the day his daughter was born. This was different. This was the sound of someone breaking apart from the inside. I started up the hill path before I could think, my legs moving on pure maternal instinct. Roberto caught my arm gently. Mom, wait, let me go first. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. He's my son. He's my brother, and right now, he's not thinking straight. Roberto's voice was patient but firm. If he really believes you've been saying things about Jessica, seeing you first might make this worse. The logic stung, but I knew he was right. Everything Michael had said, every twisted version of events he'd shared with his wife, seemed to center around me. Whatever was happening in his mind, I had somehow become the villain in his story. Jessica moved past both of us, her face set with determination. Then I'll go. If this is really about what he thinks his mother said about me, maybe it's time we had that conversation directly. She started up the path before either Roberto or I could object. The sound of Michael's crying had stopped, which somehow felt more ominous than hearing it continue. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs. This is wrong, I whispered. All of this is wrong. 6 months ago, we were fine. We were a normal family with normal problems. Roberto stayed close beside me as we followed Jessica up the darkening trail. What changed 6 months ago? I thought about it, really thought about it for the first time. The promotion at work. He was so stressed about the new responsibilities. And then Jessica started having trouble sleeping. Said she felt like he was different somehow. That's when the stories started. What stories? Little things at first. He'd mention conversations we'd had, but his version would be slightly off. Nothing dramatic. just details that didn't match what I remembered. The path was getting steeper, and I was breathing hard. Then it got worse. He started telling Jessica I'd said things I never said, criticized choices I'd never criticized. We could see Jessica ahead of us now, silhouetted against the last traces of daylight at the overlook. She had stopped walking and was standing very still. As we caught up, I could see why. Michael was sitting on the bench at the scenic overlook, his head in his hands. He wasn't crying anymore, but his whole body was shaking. Jessica was standing about 10 feet away, clearly uncertain how to approach. "Michael," she said softly, "we're worried about you." He looked up, and even in the dim light, I could see that his face was ravaged. His eyes were red and swollen, and he looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "You followed me." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Of course we followed you," Roberto said, stepping forward. "You ran off into the woods. What did you expect us to do?" "I expected you to let me go." Michael stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. "I expected you to finally give me some space instead of constantly watching me, judging me, talking about me behind my back." I couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Michael, sweetheart, we're not talking about you behind your back. We're talking about you to your face because we're scared. You haven't been yourself." "There it is." His laugh was bitter and broken. "I haven't been myself. According to who? According to all of you who've decided something's wrong with me?" Jessica stepped closer, her voice careful and measured. "Michael, 3 days ago, you told me your mother said I was trying to isolate you from your family, but she was the one who suggested we have dinner together tonight." "That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense if you understand the game." Michael's eyes were wild now, darting between the three of us. "Don't you see? This whole thing tonight, bringing me here, cornering me, making me look crazy, it's all part of it." The word game sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't grief or stress or work pressure. This was something else entirely. Something that was rewriting Michael's reality in real time. Roberto moved closer to his brother, his hands visible and non-threatening. "What game, Michael? Help us understand." "The game where everyone pretends to care while they're really just gathering evidence. The game where my own family treats me like I'm losing my mind." Michael's voice cracked. "And maybe I am. Maybe you're all right, and I'm just crazy." He sat back down heavily on the bench, and the fight seemed to go out of him all at once. In the growing darkness, he looked smaller somehow, like the scared little boy I remembered from thunderstorms and bad dreams. "I can't tell what's real anymore," he whispered, and those 6 words contained more pain than all his shouting and accusations combined. The 3 of us exchanged glances over his bowed head. The same thought was written on all our faces, but none of us wanted to be the first to say it out loud. That's when Michael looked up at us with eyes that seemed to see something we couldn't, and said the words that would change everything. "They're watching us right now, aren't they? From the trees?" I followed Michael's gaze into the shadows between the pine trees, my heart hammering against my ribs. The evening had deepened into true darkness now, and every swaying branch looked like a figure. Every rustle of wind through leaves sounded like whispered voices. "Michael, there's no one there," Jessica said gently, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. She was scared too. "You can't see them?" Michael stood up again, his movements jerky and agitated. "They've been following me for weeks, at work, at home, even when I'm driving. Sometimes I think they're inside the house." Roberto moved to stand between Michael and the tree line, as if he could physically shield his brother from whatever demons were haunting him. Who, Michael? Who do you think is following you? I don't know who they are. Michael's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and we all leaned in to hear him. But they know everything. They know what I'm thinking before I think it. They know what you're all going to say before you say it. The rational part of my mind knew we were dealing with something far beyond family drama or work stress. The word that none of us wanted to acknowledge hung in the air like smoke, acrid and impossible to ignore. But the mother in me, the part that had kissed, scraped knees, and chased away nighttime monsters, that part just wanted to wrap my grown son in my arms and promise him everything would be okay. Sweetheart, I said, taking a careful step toward him. When did this start? The feeling that people were watching you? Michael's eyes snapped to mine, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of the sun I knew. You believe me? The hope in his voice nearly broke my heart. I wanted to say yes, wanted to validate his reality if it would bring him comfort. But looking at Roberto's worried face and Jessica's barely controlled panic, I knew that wasn't the answer that would help him. I believe that you're seeing things that feel very real to you, I said carefully. But Michael, look around. Really look. We're in a public park. If someone was following you, following us, wouldn't other people notice? Wouldn't there be some sign? He spun around slowly, scanning the empty picnic area, the deserted playground, the quiet walking path. For a moment, his shoulders sagged as if the weight of doubt was crushing him. Then his posture stiffened again. That's how they want it to look. That's the whole point. He turned back to us, his expression a mixture of pity and frustration. They're not after you. You're just the tools they're using to get to me. Michael, listen to yourself, Roberto said, his voice thick with emotion. You're talking about some invisible conspiracy. You're saying your own family is being manipulated against you. Does that sound reasonable? Nothing about this is reasonable, Michael exploded, his voice echoing off the trees. Nothing about my life has been reasonable for months. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't trust my own thoughts. And instead of helping me, instead of believing me, you all just want to prove I'm wrong. Jessica stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. We want to help you, but Michael, you have to understand how this looks from our perspective. You're telling me that conversations we've had never happened. You're seeing people who aren't there. You're running away from the people who love you most. Because you're all compromised, he said, and the certainty in his voice was more frightening than all his earlier agitation. They've gotten to all of you somehow, made you think things, say things, do things that serve their purpose. I felt tears stinging my eyes as I watched my son disappear further into a reality that none of us could reach. The Michael I knew, the one who used to call me every Sunday, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who worried about his students and stayed late to help struggling kids with their homework, that Michael was still in there somewhere. But he was being consumed by something I didn't understand and couldn't fight. What do they want from you? I asked, because it seemed important to understand the logic of his fear, even if the fear itself wasn't grounded in reality. Michael looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing whether to trust me with the answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible over the evening breeze. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, they're getting closer. And tonight, bringing me here, isolating me, making me break down in front of all of you? He paused, his eyes growing distant. I think tonight was the final test. Before any of us could respond, Before we could ask what he meant by final test, Michael suddenly went rigid, his head cocked as if he was listening to something we couldn't hear. "They're coming," he breathed, backing away from us toward the parking lot. "We have to go. Now." "Michael, there's no one coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I watched him back away from us. "Look around. We're alone here." But he wasn't listening. His eyes were scanning the tree line, then the parking lot, his whole body tense like a deer sensing a predator. The panic radiating from him was so intense I could almost feel it myself. "You don't hear that?" he whispered, still backing toward the cars. "The engine. It's been idling just beyond those trees for the last 5 minutes." Roberto and I exchanged glances. The only sounds I could hear were the evening birds settling in for the night and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. "Michael, please," Jessica said, taking a tentative step toward him. "I know you're frightened, but we came here to talk, to work things out. Don't run away from us again." "Work things out?" Michael's laugh was hollow and bitter. "Jessica, don't you see? This whole thing, getting me here, isolated, emotional, breaking down my defenses. This is exactly what they wanted, and you helped them do it." The accusation hit Jessica like a physical blow. I watched her face crumple, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to cry when Michael teased her too harshly during childhood games. "I would never hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "Michael, I'm your sister. I love you. I've been worried sick about you for weeks." "I know you think that," he said, and the gentleness in his voice somehow made it worse. "I know you believe that's true, but they're good at making people believe things. They've had practice." Roberto stepped forward, his hands raised peacefully. "Son, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There is no they. There are no people in the woods. There's no conspiracy. What you're experiencing, what you're feeling, it's not real." "Then explain the phone calls," Michael shot back. "Explain how they knew exactly where I'd be last Tuesday when I changed my route home from work. Explain how they knew about the conversation I had with Jessica about Mom's birthday party when we were alone in the house." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What conversation about my birthday party?" Michael's eyes snapped to mine. "The one where you told Jessica you thought I was acting strange. Where you said you were worried I might be using drugs or having some kind of breakdown. Where you wondered if you should talk to my principal about getting me a leave of absence." Jessica's face went white. "Michael, that conversation never happened." "Stop lying!" The words exploded out of him with such force that a nearby squirrel scampered up a tree. "I heard every word. I was in the kitchen getting water, and you two were in the living room, and you said—" "Michael, I was never at the house," Jessica interrupted, her voice rising with desperation. "I haven't been to Mom's house in 3 weeks because every time I try to visit, you leave. You won't see me." The confusion that flickered across Michael's face was heartbreaking. For just a moment, he looked like a lost child trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "But I heard you," he said, quieter now. "I heard both of you talking about me." "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "I think maybe you had a dream. Or maybe you heard something on the television and thought it was us talking." "I don't dream anymore," he said flatly. "They make sure of that. They keep me awake, keep me alert, because that's when they can plant the suggestions more easily." Roberto ran his hand through his graying hair, a gesture I recognized from years of watching him struggle with difficult problems. "Michael, when's the last time you slept? Really slept? For a full night? Sleep is a luxury I can't afford right now, Michael replied, his eyes still darting between us and the trees. Every time I close my eyes, that's when they get closer. That's when they whisper their instructions. The casual way he said it, as if discussing the weather, sent another chill through me. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. This was something deeper, more systematic. What instructions? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Michael studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether I could be trusted with the information. Finally, he spoke. They want me to stop fighting them. They want me to accept what they're offering, to take the position they've prepared for me. But I know if I do that, if I give in, I'll never be myself again. What position? Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't tell you that, Michael said, shaking his head. Not yet, because once you know, once you understand what they're really after, you'll become targets too, and I can't protect all of you. The sound of a car door slamming in the parking lot made us all turn. Michael went completely rigid, his face draining of color. They found us, he breathed, and before any of us could react, he was running. Michael, wait! I called after him, but he was already disappearing around the corner of the park building. The sound of his footsteps faded, leaving the three of us standing there in stunned silence. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. In all my years of motherhood, through scraped knees and broken hearts and teenage rebellion, I had never felt this helpless. This wasn't something I could fix with a bandage or a hug or even tough love. Should we go after him? Jessica asked, her face pale and drawn. Roberto was already shaking his head. In his state of mind, chasing him would only confirm his fears that we're part of whatever conspiracy he thinks is happening. I sank onto the nearest park bench, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. Did you see how thin he's gotten? And those dark circles under his eyes? Roberto, he really isn't sleeping. The paranoia is getting worse, Roberto said, settling beside me. The delusions are becoming more elaborate, more detailed, and now he's hearing conversations that never happened. Jessica remained standing, hugging herself as if she was cold despite the warm afternoon. When he said he heard us talking, he was so specific about it. He really believes it happened. That's what scares me most, I admitted. It's not just that he's suspicious of people's motives anymore. He's literally experiencing things that aren't real. Conversations, threats, instructions from people who don't exist. The weight of it all crashed over me then. For weeks, I had been telling myself that this was just stress, that Michael was going through a rough patch that would resolve itself. But watching him run from the sound of a car door, seeing the genuine terror in his eyes when he talked about them finding us, I couldn't pretend anymore. He said they want him to accept some kind of position, Roberto said quietly. That sounds like he might be having grandiose delusions along with the paranoia. What does that mean? Jessica asked, finally sitting on the bench across from us. Roberto's expression was grim. Sometimes when people are experiencing this kind of break from reality, they develop beliefs that they're somehow special or chosen, that they have an important role to play in something bigger than themselves. I thought about Michael's words, the way he had said he couldn't tell us about the position because it would make us targets too, the protective tone in his voice, as if he was the only thing standing between us and some terrible fate. He thinks he's protecting us, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. That's why he's been pushing everyone away, He doesn't think he's hurting us by staying away. He thinks he's keeping us safe. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. No wonder he gets so angry when we try to reach out to him. In his mind, we're not respecting the sacrifice he's making for our safety. The park around us felt eerily quiet now. A few joggers passed by on the path, their conversations and laughter seeming to come from another world entirely. How had everything changed so drastically? 6 months ago, Michael had been planning a promotion at work, talking about maybe starting a family with Jessica. Now he was running from imaginary threats and hearing voices that didn't exist. I keep thinking there must have been signs I missed, I said, my voice cracking. Some moment when I should have realized how serious this was getting. Margaret, you can't blame yourself for this, Roberto said firmly. Mental health crises don't always announce themselves clearly. Sometimes they build gradually, and by the time the symptoms are obvious, the person is already too deep in their altered reality to recognize they need help. But he was my baby, I whispered, the words coming from some deep primal place in my heart. I was supposed to protect him. I was supposed to know when something was wrong. Jessica reached across the space between our benches and took my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. You did know something was wrong. You called Roberto. You arranged this meeting. You're trying to help him now. But what if it's too late? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. What if we can't reach him anymore? What if the Michael we knew is already gone? Roberto was quiet for a long moment, staring at the path where Michael had disappeared. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful and measured. The Michael you know is still in there. But right now, his reality is being filtered through fear and paranoia and exhaustion. Until we can find a way to address those underlying issues, it's going to be very difficult to have rational conversations with him. How do we do that when he won't even stay in the same place as us for more than 10 minutes? Jessica asked. It was a fair question, and one I didn't have an answer for. Every approach we had tried so far had backfired spectacularly. Gentle concern made him suspicious. Direct confrontation made him angry. And now, even sitting in a public park felt too threatening for him to handle. My phone buzzed in my purse. For a wild moment, I hoped it might be Michael, maybe calling to apologize or explain. But when I checked, it was just a spam text about an extended car warranty. He's going to go home eventually, I said, more to myself than to the others. He has to. His car is there, his clothes, everything. Unless he doesn't feel safe there anymore either, Roberto pointed out gently. The thought sent a new wave of panic through me. What if Michael decided his apartment was compromised? What if he ended up on the streets, convinced that any form of shelter was a trap? We have to do something, I said, standing up abruptly. We can't just sit here and wait for him to get worse. What are you thinking? Jessica asked, though there was wariness in her voice. I wasn't sure myself. All I knew was that the traditional approaches weren't working, and Michael was slipping further away from us with each passing day. Soon, he might be so deep in his altered reality that we wouldn't be able to reach him at all. Maybe it's time to stop trying to convince him that his fears aren't real, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke. Maybe we need to meet him where he is and work from there. Roberto and Jessica exchanged a look that I couldn't quite read, but before either of them could respond, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. My hands shook as I stared at Michael's name on the screen. Jessica and Roberto both leaned forward, their eyes locked on my phone. Answer it, Jessica whispered urgently. I swiped to accept the call, putting it on speaker so we could all hear. Michael, honey, are you okay? There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of traffic in the background. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more fragmented than it had been even an hour ago. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't interrupt, okay? I think my phone might be monitored, so I can't talk long. I caught Roberto's eye. He nodded slightly, encouraging me to go along with it. This was what I had meant about meeting Michael where he was. I'm listening, sweetheart. I figured out why Jessica brought Roberto today. It wasn't random. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Jessica's been feeding him information about me, about us, about our family. That's how he knew exactly what to say to try to get me to trust him. Jessica's face went pale, but I held up a hand before she could protest. If we were going to reach Michael, we had to stop contradicting his reality at every turn. That sounds really frightening, I said carefully. You must feel very alone right now. Another long pause. You believe me? The vulnerability in his voice broke my heart. This was still my son underneath all the fear and confusion. I believe that you're scared and that you're trying to protect yourself and the people you love. I am. I'm trying to protect you too, Mom. That's why I had to leave. They were going to use you to get to me. They probably still are. Jessica was gripping the edge of the bench so hard her knuckles were white. I could see her struggling not to defend herself, not to point out the obvious contradictions in what Michael was saying. Michael, I said gently, what if there was a way to keep everyone safe without you having to handle this all by yourself? There isn't, don't you see? Everyone I trust eventually turns out to be part of it. First Jessica, then Roberto. Soon it'll be you too if it isn't already. Roberto cleared his throat softly. Michael, can you hear me? I can hear you. Michael's voice turned cold again. What do you want? I want to tell you something that might sound strange, but I think you'll understand it better than most people would. I held my breath. Roberto was taking a risk here. Sometimes, when our minds are trying to protect us from something overwhelming, they create patterns and connections that feel absolutely real to us, even when other people can't see them. It doesn't mean we're crazy or weak. It means we're human beings dealing with more stress than we can handle. The line was quiet for so long that I thought Michael might have hung up. You think I'm having a breakdown? He finally said. I think you're having a very human response to whatever's been happening in your life lately. And I think you're exhausted from trying to figure it all out on your own. Even if that were true, how would I know who to trust? How would I know the difference between what's real and what's just in my head? Jessica spoke for the first time since the call began. You start with the people who love you and work outward from there. But what if I can't tell the difference anymore? What if I've already lost that ability? The question hung in the air, and I realized this was the real heart of Michael's terror. It wasn't just that he thought people were conspiring against him. It was that he was starting to doubt his own perception of reality, and that doubt was more frightening than any external threat could be. Then we'll help you figure it out, I said. One small thing at a time, no pressure, no big decisions, just small steps. I don't know how to do that. Well, I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. Maybe you could start by coming home, not to talk about any of this heavy stuff, just because you need a safe place to sleep and eat a real meal. What if I can't stop thinking about all of this? What if I can't turn it off? Roberto leaned closer to the phone. Then you don't have to. You can think about whatever you need to think about. But you can do it somewhere warm and safe with people who care about you. Michael was quiet again. In the background, I could hear the sound of cars passing, and I realized he was probably still walking somewhere, maybe miles from where he'd left us. "I'm really tired," he admitted finally. "I know you are, honey." "And I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday." Jessica and I exchanged a look. That explained some of the deterioration we'd witnessed. "Let me come pick you up," I offered. "Just me. No one else has to be there if you don't want them to be." "But what if you're right and this is all in my head? What if I've been putting Jessica through hell for no reason?" "Then we'll deal with that when you're feeling stronger. Right now, the only thing that matters is getting you somewhere safe." There was another long pause, and then Michael gave me an intersection about 2 miles away. "I'll wait here for 20 minutes. If it feels wrong when you show up, I'm going to leave." "That's fair," I said. "I'll see you soon." The call ended, and the three of us sat in stunned silence for a moment. "That was exactly right," Roberto said quietly. "Both of you. You met him where he was instead of trying to drag him back to where you thought he should be." Jessica was crying, but she was trying to hide it. "I should have realized how bad it had gotten. I should have called you sooner." "You called when you knew how," I said, standing up and gathering my purse. "And now we have a chance to help him. That's what matters." As I walked toward my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not because the situation was resolved, but because, for the first time, we'd managed to have a conversation with Michael that ended with him moving toward safety instead of away from it. Sometimes the first step toward healing isn't figuring out what's wrong. Sometimes it's just convincing someone they don't have to face their fears alone.